Hello, everyone. My name is Ariana Franklin, and today I will be presenting to you all on the unapologetic life of Ida B. Wells Barnett. Ida B. Wells was a sociologist in her own right, an anti lynching advocate, Black feminist advocate, and a journalist, amongst a bunch of other things. And she did so many beautiful things. This essay will be addressing a bulk of it all. So, I want to discuss with you all the origin of Ida B. Wells, as well as the basis of Black feminist thoughts, Wells' anti-lynching efforts, and her accessibility efforts. And also, I will discuss her legacy through the lens of contemporary activism efforts today, with two different organizations here in Chicago. But lastly, I will discuss Ida B. Wells' impact on me. So, jumping into the origin, Ida B. Wells was born into slavery in Holly Springs. Both of her parents were slaves as well, but the family was emancipated during the Civil Rights Move or the Civil War. And Wells spoke very highly of her parents. They instilled education into her and her seven siblings quite a bit. And she even mentions on page 8 of Crusade for Justice that the job of herself and her siblings was to go to school and learn as much as they possibly could, which really shows how much education was valued within the entire family. Although Wells's father was a carpenter and her mother was a known cook, Wells does recall her parents being a little bit involved politically because race riots were erupting down south at the time, and she remembers hearing the phrase Ku Klux Klan quite often. But unfortunately, when Wells was 16 years old, her parents, along with her baby brother, died of yellow fever, and that left Wells to jump into protective mode of her siblings and the six remaining ones, and she really wanted to make sure to be there for them and care for them. So she managed to convince a school that she was 18 years old while she was only 16, and they hired her as a teacher, and this supported her siblings, but it would not last for forever. So the responsibility, we have to imagine, was a very large job for Wells. You know, she's only 16, she's caring for these six kids. So during the early 1880s, she reaches adulthood, and so she migrates to Memphis with her siblings to her Aunt Fanny's home. And according to page 40 of A Sword Among Lions, Memphis was Ida's first urban Black setting. Like, it had accessibility to everything. She was like interested to be there. It was just a town Ida saw a lot of potential in. And in 1884, she was discriminated against and in the city, and she had rightfully a first class pass to be on this train, but the train conductor demanded that she gave up her seat and her ticket and sit in the smoking car. So Wells had a mouth and she was going to use it, and she refused. She was not getting off of this train car. So she was dragged out of the car by three men, including the train conductor. And so she sues. Of course, she sues. And she wins the case on a state level, wins $500. And this all led her to write a bunch of newspaper articles. You know, she had been writing editorials and small articles here and there, but she was writing. She was writing about her experiences and the racism she was facing and the education system and the things that were happening at the school she worked at, and just like a plethora of things that outraged society around her and outraged the school she worked at. And she ended up getting fired from her teaching job. But I feel like this is truly a blessing in disguise, because Wells then turned around and became a journalist full time. And while like it's unfortunate that she got fired, we really have to credit that for her being a journalist, because you know, Wells was an activist and journalist that was ahead of her time, one of the greatest of her time. So, you know, everything works out. So, the train situation mixed with the things Wells did in her lifetime actually relate to a theory that I learned within my class called Black Feminist thought. And Collins describes this as the long-term and widely shared resistance among African American women can only have been sustained by an enduring and shared standpoint among Black women about the meaning of oppression and the actions that Black women can and should take to resist it. So, you know, Black feminist thought can be practiced and observed by all women. It is something that we can all relate to as a shared experience, you know, from things like being publicly oppressed or just our day to day lives as Black women. And the theory has really been highlighted and practiced by Black scholarly women in higher education, but it is something we can all appreciate. In relation to it, Collins iterates that specialized thought challenging notions of Black and female inferiority is unlikely to be generated within a white male controlled academic community because both the kinds of questions that could be asked and the explanations that would be found satisfying would necessarily reflect a basic lack of familiarity with Black women's realities. So, Black feminist thought not only expresses the personal experiences of Black women from a sociological standpoint, but it validates these experiences that many outsiders who have the power to validate the experiences refuse to recognize in academia. And before the theory was created and accepted, Wells was experiencing invalidation from men of her race and white outsiders. You know, it's something that we can see in a bunch of her work. And this is just, it really relates. She was Black feminist thought, you know? But I would now like to discuss Wells's anti-lynching efforts, and it is a heavy topic. It discusses violence, so that is a warning. Ida B. Wells's The Red Record addressed the heinous acts committed against Black men at the hands of lynch mobs in the late 1800s, and Wells initially highlight the reasonings of fatal violence against Black men by explaining that emancipation came in the vested interest of the white man and the Negro's body was lost. And the book focused on the alarming ways in which white women accused Black men of crimes that a majority did not commit, thus leading to the murders of many innocent Black men at the hands of these mobs. And Walsh explored the lynchings. It became very evident to me as I was reading the detailed exploration that the justice system today has failed to resolve this above the law mentality that was seen in white murderers of the 1800s. And her big interest to pursue journalism on lynching stemmed from the loss of a friend of hers. His name was Thomas Moss, and he was lynched alongside two of his coworkers or workers at his grocery store, Calvin McDowell and Will Stewart, by a white mob that wanted to incite a race war against Moss. You know, they incorrectly accused Moss of plotting a war against white people, but in reality, the white mob in the area was angry because Moss owned the successful grocery store as a Black man, and they did not want that store in their area. So, towards the end of the Red Record, after she details and goes through all of this research to compile all of it, she makes demands to the U.S. government, and she states that we demand a fair trial by law for those accused of crime and punishment by law after honest conviction. No sympathy for criminals is solicited, but we do ask the law shall punish all alike. And she goes on to make a list of demands to Congress in hopes of making a change to the community. And although we have not seen much change even since Wells' anti-lynching campaign, the Black community is still advocating for changes for trying to catch the attention of legislators in Congress today. We will discuss more about Coco later but Wells' The Red Record does remind me of a young lady from Coco, Isaiah Roberts. She was only 13 at the time when she requested help from the organization to assist her in holding marches and making noise within the city and bringing awareness and demanding answers about the missing women in Chicago from Chicago's government, and the work that went into the marches and still goes into it as they still do these marches around Chicago today every summer, as along with the records that they have to keep of the missing women in Chicago, really aligned with the efforts and research of Ida B. Wells' The Red Record. So next, I want to talk about Ida B. Wells' accessibility efforts. And although Wells was a very educated woman, she did not complete higher education. And I believe that that mixed with her parents living as slaves and not learning how to read until later in life really encouraged her to care about the education of her community. And I also think that her taking the role as a caretaker, as a young woman, you know, and like having to care for her siblings and teach them things really bleeds into her inclusivity efforts within her activism. And I think that one of the key components of Wells' activisms was her goal of making her knowledge easily accessible to her community. You know, she mentions on page 22 of Crusade for Justice that under her writing alias Iola, she made a mention in her weekly letters in the living way to write in a plain common sense way on the things that concerned our people. And this connects to Black feminist thought as well, because Black feminist thought is not specifically engaged with Black women that are scholars. It is contributed by any everyday Black woman as well, and anybody who can understand plain language, or anybody that is a Black woman that's a scholar. So Wells wanted nothing more to connect her community, as she published easily understandable pieces in the women's columns of newspapers. But although it was the women's column, Mia Bay explains in If Iola Were a Man that Wells wrote about racial discrimination and policies as well as more ladylike subjects, and her work reflected her awareness of the impact of these issues for men and women alike. Wells' inclusivity of both man and woman, combined with her understanding that plain language needs to be used, proves that Wells knew her audience. She knew how to reach them by writing for Black newspapers, and she knew what would keep their attention because she wanted her people to know the truth by any means possible. So now today, we have so many wonderful organizations continuing the accessibility efforts of Wells. And I had the opportunity of meeting with collaborators from Kenwood Oakland Community Organization, as well as the Black Researchers Collective. And COCO was started by mothers and women who wanted to mend the tension between North Kenwood and Oakland. But similar to Ida B. Wells, COCO worked with churches to complete their efforts. And today they focus on social service, having things like a food pantry, youth summer jobs, and after school programs. And they provide referrals to help people. They provide referrals to help people with apartments and expungements of charges, and they truly focus on restorative justice. So, COCO works in coalitions with other organizations around the city. They fight for policies that prevent misplacement, housing, and protect the public. And similar to Ida B. Wells, COCO focuses on community outreach. They believe that those who are impacted the most should be centered the most to do the activism, and they do good organizing. Their strategy is developed for people to gain a resource or a policy change or policy improvement. Ida B. Wells really wanted to influence other people to become leaders and uplifting the community with knowledge. And COCO has a main goal to produce leaders within the organization. And they're just so phenomenal. And I would highly recommend checking them out. Now, for the Black Researchers Collective, they are so amazing as well. The Black Researchers Collective is a team of researchers who are all women, Black women, and they believe in being Black women as laborers of love, out of genuineness rather than benefit. And like Ida B. Wells in the Red Record, when she made her demands that Black people receive a fair trial rather than be murdered, even if they're guilty, the Black Researcher Collective strives for equity and fairness before equality. So they believe that we need equalness, which is equity, before we can have equality. We need to be equal before everybody is the same. We need to have the same treatment. And now I have not touched on was feminist efforts that much, but Wells believed in separating the issues of Black feminists versus white feminists because we face two separate things, and BRC believes something alike as within the Black feminist agenda. The use of umbrellaing people of color and POC does not always benefit Black people. And in comparison to Wells' accessibility efforts, BRC is also community outreach based. They find people with little and high education to spread knowledge amongst the community. They teach people how to propose policies locally, as starting local issues is how change is made. And I recall one of the women breaking down the word data to us all, and she used plain language doing it to reach the point that everything is data. And the lesson remained with me because Ida uses plain language as BSR believes that not everything has to be complicated and use big words. As long as a simple understanding is met, anyone in our community can learn how to properly research. And I just feel that BRC is just full of amazing women who strive to better our communities. So you guys should check them out as well if you get the chance. But Wells' activism has affected many different aspects of our community, whether intentionally or unintentionally, but her resistance, her resilience, and her sense of community has really been something that I will take with me. I often think about my role as a young Black practicing scholar at a predominantly white school and the knowledge that I have been fortunate enough to gain. And it wasn't until I took this class about the life of Ida B. Wells that I realized that sharing knowledge with your community does not have to be done in a formal way. Education is very important to me, just like Wells, but I also strive to have the versatile intellect of Ida. Ida's intellect allows her to speak to people in academia, but it also allows her to speak to those with lower education at all. And Ida has also inspired me to resist injustice. She always spoke her mind with a blunt tongue, and she was the walking definition of an activist. She was resilient. People told her when she had children and when she was married that she should stop being an activist, and she had to pick one, and she kept going because she was passionate about this. And with that, I want to leave you all with one of my favorite Ida B. Wells quotes, and it really just shows she was fighting to give the true history to our people. And it reads, The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them. And that is just something we should all consider as a community today and keep empowering each other. So thank you and goodbye.